And now we begin with the COVID-19 situation in South Korea. Schools nationwide are opening their gates to all students from today. But with the infection caseload over 3,000 and vaccination rates low among young teenagers, many are concerned whether this decision is coming at the right time.
Yeah, they certainly are. So for more on this and other COVID-related news, I'm happy to say again, we have our Kim Yeon-seung joining us in the studio. Wonderful to see you again, Yeonsung.
Good morning, Mark.
Schools fully reopening this morning. Tell us more.
Right, so before today, most middle and high schools had a 2/3 attendance cap. Now, with the exception of a handful of schools in the Greater Seoul region that will keep the caps and restrictions in place due to the high number of students and staff, 97% of all schools in the Greater Seoul region have decided to lift their attendance cap. Opening the school gates has always been part of the gradual easing of COVID-19 restrictions. As you know, the plan itself started on November 1st, but authorities were extra wary of outbreaks ahead of the Suneung, or the National College Entrance Exam. To minimize the number of students infected, a lot of high schools went completely online for the few weeks leading up to this really big national exam. But now that Suneung has wrapped up last week, authorities were finally able to allow this transition to happen.
So, Yeonsung, what are the changes that the schools are making in their policies this time?
Well, for one, they are changing the school policies based on the fact that some of their students have been fully vaccinated. Those aged 16 and 17 were eligible for the jabs since last month, and children aged 12 to 15 began getting vaccinated on the 1st of November. So now, if a student has been fully vaccinated and has a proof of a negative PCR test, they can still come into class even if their family members or any of their cohabitants test positive for COVID-19 or go into quarantine. They weren't able to before.
Right, so that's quite the big change there, really. So with that in mind, what kind of concerns do health authorities have about this 100% reopening of schools from today?
Well, many are still doubtful whether this is the right choice made at the right time. For one, vaccination rates among teenagers aren't still that high. A little over 40% of those aged 16 to 17 were fully inoculated, while only less than 1% of children from 12 to 15 have completed their jabs. It still hasn't been long since vaccinations for these age groups have started, so the authorities are really hoping that the vaccination rates really perk up as the school semester progresses. The spike in infections that the country has been seeing lately has also been one of the main concerns. The country just wrapped up the third week of the gradual easing of restrictions, and it's already seen daily tallies above 3,000 for 5 days in a row. Usually the numbers tallied over the weekend tend to simmer down a little bit, but as you can see here, the numbers over the weekend have still shot through that 3,000 mark. Now, health authorities have logged up to 25 new 100 infections on 9 p.m. Sunday, more than 600 cases higher than the tally measured up to the same time last Sunday. So this could mean another daily figure close to that 3,000 mark when the official tally for Monday morning comes out in a few hours.
Well, Yeonsung, I seem to recall that the shortage of ICU beds were a big concern last week. How about this week? How are we faring on that front?
Well, that's still a really big concern because ICU beds are filling up rather quickly. Over the weekend, ICU beds in the Greater Seoul region filled up to more than 80% capacity, the most it's ever seen. In just a day, the share of ICU beds jumped 2.5 percentage points, while more than 800 people had to wait for their turn in their beds on Saturday. Last week, health authorities announced that they were going to look at the proportion of ICU beds filled as well as other data to judge if the country's healthcare sector is heading toward its breaking point. And they said that based on this data, they're going to make an assessment every week on where the country stands in regards to threat levels from a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being very low and 5 being very high. Well, they're going to announce their very first assessment this afternoon, so I'll be giving an update on that during our afternoon newscast.
Thank you, Yeonsung. We will be looking forward for that too.